Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric, one of the most infamous Sonic games of all time, and a perfect example of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you watched my 10 years of Sonic Boom video, you'd remember the agony this game went through and all the problems behind the scenes. But what if it wasn't like that? What if Sonic Boom was actually good? This is Sonic Boom: Rise Again. So before we get into anything, just gonna say I'm gonna be more nonchalant since this is going to be a longer video. This is unscripted right here, so I'm just gonna I got a big old script that I wrote for this, so I'm just gonna read it kind of nonchalantly and kind of add my own little improv into it, so expect that. But anyway, yeah, let's get into the pitch. Anyways, ground rules for Sonic Boom. For my pitch, I want to be mostly faithful to the original game while not really going too far from it, while also being something much better than we got originally, while also tying into the show. Think of it as like Sonic Origins? Yeah, I know that was bad, I know. I also want this to be just one big complete game, not two different games like we got in the original, like, you know, like Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric and Sonic Boom: Shattered Crystal. But I also want to keep Fire and Ice. I honestly think that was a good game. And it tied into the TV show, which I liked, so we're just going to just not touch Fire and Ice here. Just Rise of Lyric and Shattered Crystal and try to make them into one real, like, complete finished game, you know? So yeah. Okay, so the story had an interesting concept with Lyric, the Ancients, and even the cool time travel idea that went full circle, but with my pitch, we can take that so much further without going too far. The cold open for the game, in my opinion, was a good concept, but ultimately went nowhere. So I want it to be similar, with Sonic getting attacked by robots and telling us, you know, how we got into the situation in the first place. The game would still open with Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, but I'll also have the added inclusion of Styx because she was somehow not included in Rise of Lyric, even though she was playable in Shattered Crystal, and even though she's a main character in the TV show. So yeah, we'll just add Styx into the main team. But yeah, they'll all be going through the forest battling Eggman, but instead of running through a forest, they would be actively fighting him and moving throughout the forest in high speed, the high speed section. This can also act like a tutorial as it goes from high speed to then seamlessly transitioning into ground battles. Think of it as like Hi-Fi Rush in that sort of aspect. Notice how I said ground battles though, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, it'll also act as a tutorial for combat, as you have to fight waves of enemies as well as Metal Sonic for the first time. So basically just like the main game, except you actually get to fight Metal Sonic and the horde of robots instead of Sonic and team desperately running into the tomb to run away from them, which I never understood. That was so stupid. One thing that really did tick me off about Rise of Lyric is that for some reason they all blame Sonic for the mess that they got into, even though that they all technically were at fault for doing it. So we're just gonna retcon that to say that never happens, because it doesn't really matter in the end. There's no character development at all for this. They don't bring it up later in the game. They don't even reference it after that happens, so it doesn't really matter. So yeah, we're just gonna retcon all that. But anyways, after fighting Eggman and driving him off, they make their way in through the forest and end up running into an ancient temple of sorts. But instead of entering Lyric's tomb out of desperation, like I said, they enter out of curiosity. Sonic and Tails notice that the door to the mysterious building has everyone's murals on it, just like normal, but instead of Sonic and Tails, it's everybody. So Tails tries to study the door and how to open it, but of course Knuckles, being a meathead like he is in Boom, he knocks it down anyways. Think of it as like a reference to the Sonic movie 3, you know, with when they're entering the gun lab. So as they enter the tomb, the interior doesn't really look anything like the original game does. It'll be bigger, more fleshed out, kind of like an actual ancient ruin. And think of it as like a sanctuary for a game. Think of it as like a sanctuary for the ancients. But obviously it being ruined after 1,000 years of decay, you know. But Lyric would still be sealed away deep in the building somewhere. They would eventually discover Lyric, just like the original game, and accidentally free him, as the game as the game continues exactly the way it did before. Of course, with dialogue changes here and there. Again, the retcon from earlier. They would already have their inner beams at this point. I don't know, maybe Tails makes them makes the inner beams for the team. They've never explained this in the original show. Like, they've never explained this in the show either, so it doesn't really matter here. They just have them, I guess. But yeah, they go and chase him on the inner beams, just like the original game, to Cliff's excavation site. From this point, though, it goes a little similar, as, Cliff explains who the Ancients are and their beef with Lyric, and what Lyric's goals are for the world, trying to take it over with robots. He also explains that ancient tech's been steadily uncovered throughout the entire site, and if Lyric finds that place, it would obviously not be good for the world. He also explains the only way to stop him is to find the Chaos Emeralds. Yes, the Chaos Emeralds, not the Chaos Crystals. I don't know what they were thinking there. They could have just said the Chaos Emeralds, but yeah, we're going to replace the Chaos Crystals, bootleg Chaos Emeralds. We're going to bring in the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Like, why not, right? Knuckles explains in the show that Angel Island exists, so why not have the Chaos Emeralds? It just doesn't make sense. So yeah. Their journey obviously takes them all over the world, just like the original game. Most of the locations would be the same, but obviously much better, more fleshed out, more, distinct. But yeah, after they collect 3 of the emeralds, because there's only 3 emeralds on the island, Cliff explains that the rest are on the next island over, which is named Bygone Island, just like in Rise of Lyric. Remember that this town isn't named in the show. There's a whole episode about that. If you have watched the original show, you'll probably remember it being renamed to Hedgehog Island, not because of Sonic, but because of Amy, funnily enough. But yeah, it would be called Bygone Island by the citizens, not officially named. To kind of, again, link it to the show. But either way, yeah. Either way, as, before they go there, they find an ancient plane in the excavation site and use that to transition over to the next island. But yeah, as they crash into the island, though, they're greeted by some civilians nearby, as well as the mayor, who saw them all crash land. So they all introduce themselves and explain what's going on. And the mayor tells them that they do have the Chaos Emeralds on the island, but they're very hidden, so to ward off anyone who, is going to use them for evil, like Lyric, So you go through all the different areas, all of them unique and vibrant to add on to the world of Sonic Boom, and obviously the island the creatures inhabit. The locations were unique in some aspects, but they weren't really that interesting, if I'm going to be honest. I would also like you to be forced to play as different characters, like how you play as Amy and Knuckles later on into the game. Just more throughout the game. Anyways, one thing that I think they should touch on a lot more is the time travel aspect. I think that was really cool. They did ask the aspect of the time travel in Rise of Lyric was cool and it did impact the story, but I want it to be like right before the final level. So like we learn about everything with the ancients in the past and then get to fight Lyric. Now we know all the information we need, now we can go and fight him, that sort of deal. Instead of it being in the middle of the game, just as kind of like a one-off little thing that never gets brought back. Except for a little like Easter egg. Either way, so Sonic and Tails time travel, just like normal, again, except it's later on in the game, where they have most of the emeralds, not all of them still, but, yeah. But while they're doing this, they run into Shadow, who's found an emerald himself. For Shadow's inclusion, I do want him to be a bigger threat, and for that, I want him to kind of explain his motivations. So right before Sonic and Tails time travel, they run into Shadow, like I said, and they're like, "What are you doing here?" And Shadow's like, maybe it's a kind of a reference to Sonic Adventure 2, where he's like, "It all comes to this," or whatever, or "It all starts with this," and basically he would explain that after he lost Maria, the surfboard Maria. If you remember, this is kind of a deep cut, but Ian Flynn, who's been working on the newer Sonic stories recently, and he also worked on the Archie comics a little bit, he basically had a pitch for Shadow's origin story. Maria was not a human, but a surfboard that broke when he was surfing one day, and ever since then he has had a chip on his shoulder, and I thought that was really funny. I think we could add that into this game just to add like a little bit of comedy. But yeah, after he loses Maria, he wants revenge on the world. So he wants to destroy everything. He wants revenge, just like in the last couple episodes of Sonic Boom. He doesn't care if the world's destroyed by the temporal anomaly or whatever it was called. But anyways, after he explains it though, the time machine turns on, and he thinks that if he can grab the emeralds in the past and use them for himself, the Sonic and team won't be able to grab them in the future. They won't exist. All the past would be kind of rewritten there. So, yeah. So he jumps to the portal, but Sonic and Tails are in hot pursuit, so he doesn't do that. This can then lead into the time travel segments from the original game, where you're going through the lab from like 1,000 years ago. But I also want there to be secrets, more secrets than there were. There's an Easter egg. If you go and into a secret room, you find like a scientist and stuff like that that's like working on this like plant growth serum that like destroys like a part of I think it's like Slowpoke Isle or something, whatever it's called, like with this giant like thorn bush that destroys the whole like a whole section of like the town. And if you find this secret, it doesn't happen and you can explore more, but it doesn't really do anything ultimately in the game. So I want to kind of change that to have more stuff like that, to where you can actually affect stuff later on in the game in this level. So yeah, we'll have multiple different like hidden secrets, Easter eggs, different, maybe you can get like different endings maybe, or not endings, but more so different outcomes throughout the story. So yeah, maybe like your playthrough will be easier if you find these secrets and stuff like that. Instead of having to go the difficult long way, you can just, instead of like having to go around the thorn bushes and stuff like that, you can just go through the town and stuff like that without having to worry about any danger, because the danger never existed in the first place, because you changed that. But anyways, as you finish the level, you run into Shadow, who you do have to fight, fortunately. So you fight Shadow in like the middle of like this big area where one of those giant robots that Lyric wanted to control, like you fight him in that kind of area, and as you're fighting you like destroy the robot or like damage it, and that can like the giant destroyed robot in Cliff's excavation site, that could be like, that's where that comes from, it wasn't just abandoned, but Sonic and Shadow influenced that to happen. But anyways, the fight ends eventually as you kick Shadow through a wall, and he gets knocked out, and he drops the emerald. But yeah, Tails grabs the emerald and Sonic grabs Shadow, and they're about to open a time portal home. But as Sonic throws Shadow through the portal, expecting him to end up where they were before when they get back, Lyric finds Sonic and Tails, and obviously Lyric's confused, like, who are these people? I don't know who they are, and stuff like that. So you fight Lyric again, but it's more of like a mini boss instead of like an actual boss like Shadow was. So yeah, you defeat Lyric in this like mini boss section, and Sonic locks Lyric in like the room just like the original game, and he also has a "see you in 1,000 years" talk. But we'd also maybe get like a hint to the ancients, and so maybe we see the ancients like lock like maybe take Lyric away or something like that and imprison him. But just so we know like what the ancients look like, you know what I mean? They don't have to be fully expanded. Maybe like side content or like Easter eggs or little lore drops for like 100%ers, like they can explain on the ancients lore and stuff over time, instead of just being this team of people that like they don't get any explanation at all. So yeah, anyways, Sonic didn't know, or what Sonic didn't know is that on the other side there was something wrong with the time portal, and after this level you get kind of the opposite perspective for what Knuckles, Amy, and Styx were doing at the time. They were basically fighting Eggman and Metal Sonic. Metal Sonic having a Chaos Emerald and being powered up by it. So they basically send you basically play another boss fight with Eggman and Metal Sonic and stuff like that. It's not difficult because Shadow's supposed to be kind of the difficult boss fight here. Anyways, you play as Knuckles, Amy, and Styx fighting Eggman and Metal Sonic. You beat Eggman, but you purposely like lose to Metal Sonic. But yeah, right after you lose to Metal Sonic, that's when Tails and Sonic come back to the present. And with that, Metal Sonic sees Sonic and he kind of gets like scared or whatever, and he like flies off because he knows that Sonic's gonna steal the emerald from him. So obviously he doesn't want that. But after this, the final level would still be Lyric's Lair. With Eggman though in this game, I want him to be a little more of a role. But instead of like him wanting to team up with Lyric and take over the world, he wants to kind of beat Lyric at his own game and take over the world in his way. Because he sees him as like a knockoff version of him, you know what I mean? But anyways, as you go to Lyric's Lair, it's still kind of like the same. They go to Lyric's Lair on the plane, just like, again, like the original game. You go through different locations, you go through another high-speed section, and you just kind of go through the level, again, just like normal. Again, going through high-speed sections, fighting waves of enemies, solving different puzzles, maybe using the Enter Beam. Maybe the Enter Beam can be kind of like just like the original game and be used for puzzles and stuff. Maybe just a little more better implemented. But after you do all that, they end the stage. But as they go through the final area, they run into Metal Sonic, who has the final emerald they need, or one of the last emeralds that they need. But anyways, this could tie into the flashback at the beginning. Instead of Sonic being blasted by a bunch of different robots, it could be him being beat up by Metal Sonic, and you know, we don't know why he's being beat up by Metal Sonic or whatever. But this could be why, like, he's powered up by a Chaos Emerald and stuff like that. But anyways, as he's getting beat up, Shadow comes out of a time portal and kicks Metal Sonic to the side, and that's where he's ended up. You know, he's ended up just a little more into the future, not with Sonic in the past. Instead of being sent to the final level, like right after Sonic and Team beat Lyric and Eggman, Eggman is there, but you know, he passes out or something, and you know, instead of that, you know, he could appear to help Sonic defeat Metal Sonic. So yeah, he tosses Sonic the Emerald reluctantly and scurries off. He's like, "We're not done yet." You know, so he runs off, and right as Sonic's about to catch the Emerald, that's when Lyric comes in, grabs it and steals it from him and stuff like that. So after that, he uses the power of the Chaos Emerald, or he uses the power of the Chaos Emerald to essentially bring all the other ones to him, and he basically uses them in like for his machine army, and it powers up a giant robot. But as it's powering up this giant robot, you have to fight Lyric one last time to get the emeralds back. So you fight Lyric pretty similarly to how he you know, in the original game and stuff like that. But Team Sonic is too late because the giant robot is activated and stuff like that, and he has the power to destroy basically the entire world, little by little, using the power of the Chaos Emeralds. But Sonic is able to snatch the emeralds just in time to turn into Super Sonic. So yeah, we get kind of a Super Sonic boss fight, like a final boss with the robot. Maybe something similar to Sonic Frontiers, you know, with the Titans and stuff. Maybe it could be like a reference to it. But yeah, after the robot's defeated, Sonic lands back with his friends. And the emeralds disperse throughout the world, and they go home and they celebrate their victory. But either way, that would kind of be the ending of the story. But the game would end with a post-credit scene of Shadow discovering a Chaos Emerald for himself, and you know, that maybe could hint to a sequel and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that'd be really cool. So yeah, that's the story aspect of the game. But with this story segment over, I'm gonna take a quick break real quick. I just want to take the time to tell you guys thank you so much for the recent support for my latest few videos. That really does mean a lot, and I'm so close to 1K, so please, if you really enjoy my content, you really want to see more from me, please consider subscribing so I can reach 1K by the end of the year. That is my goal. So yeah, if you watch this far, thank you so much. But anyways, let's continue. We still got a few more points, so yeah. To be honest, the gameplay for the original Rise of Lyric was pretty bare bones, if I'm gonna be honest. There were some decent aspects, but ultimately, just like the game, it was an utter letdown. So to resolve this, we're going to improve on the seeds that have been planted, starting with the combat. I think the combat should take inspiration from Frontiers, like flowing combat, skill tree levels, and maybe add in gear. You know, they kind of did that in the original game, but not really. But for each character, I want each character to have unique abilities and moves. Maybe some characters are stronger, but are slower, or vice versa. They're all unique in their own ways. But yeah, the exploration also was pretty bare bones. Like bland. Like, if you have ever played Rise of Lyric, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is no NPCs on that island. It's just an empty like island with like 3 NPCs that are like story NPCs. Like, we don't have NPCs like walking around the island or whatever. There's just like a few people that, you know. So we're going to change that pretty heavily for both islands. I want them to be pretty decently, like, they feel like they're lived in. With good open world games, I love when games feel like they've been lived in. Like, people, maybe buildings look like they've been, you know, used, like they've been worn out over time, just stuff like that. But I would love for each island and each location, even levels, to have like collectibles, Easter eggs, maybe different upgrades for the characters, etc., etc. Yeah, I think it would be really, really sick. Just some sort of miscellaneous stuff here. I did mention high speed sections and ground battles. Ground battles, pretty self-explanatory, just fighting enemies on the ground using your combos and stuff like that. I would say it would be a little similar to Triple Z, if you've ever played Zenless Zone Zero. Maybe like a little blend of Triple Z, Sonic Frontiers, and possibly like Spider-Man. Either way, I think it should take most of inspiration from Frontiers, since this is basically a Frontiers a prequel. The Rise of Lyric was basically their first shot at something like Sonic Frontiers, and I think this game essentially being Frontiers 2, but in a different universe, is kind of what I mean here. But anyways, high speed sections, I think should be a good mix between the original game's high speed sections, but also the ones from Fire and Ice with the fissures. I really like the ones from Fire and Ice where you have to think on the spot and you have to swap between your different abilities. So I think that should be taken into account. And yeah, like I said, different pathways so you can get maybe quicker times, enemies and stuff like that are, you know, maybe there to kind of provide more exploration through these quicker pathways and stuff like that. But yeah. I think the characters, maybe after a level or after combat, should all level up together instead of one. I don't really like games, this is a hot take for me, but I don't like games where you have to manually level up every single character. I think that's the biggest problem with a lot of RPGs. Especially with me recently with Zenless Zone Zero. That's a big problem for me personally. I don't like, I think Persona 5 also had a big problem with this as well, but not as bad because your team levels up together. It's just the characters you have in your team level up on their own pace, which can get really annoying. So I think everyone in your whole team, like every character, even if they're not on your party, they all level up at the same time. Um, so yeah, it can really slow the pacing and enjoyment of the game, because it's kind of just an endless grind instead of actually, you know, putting that towards enjoyment for the game. And for the love of all things that are good in this world, please, this game has to be on modern consoles. The Wii U was the reason this game sucked and played like utter garbage, bro. I swear, this game you can barely even open the game. I tried opening up Sonic Boom on my Wii U like a few years ago, and it was just stuttering like crazy. I can barely even load into the game with the game like stuttering and lagging like crazy. And that's honestly the worst part of this, is how, you know, just badly made this game is. And this, let's just go to the reflection, because this is honestly just going to go to the reflection. This game could have been so much better, but, you know, like the brilliant people at Big Red Button and IllFonic, yes, IllFonic worked on this game. You might recognize them from a couple more recent games, like some horror games. But yeah, I think the people at IllFonic and Big Red Button wanted this game to be big, but ultimately it just went right down the drain, right down the garbage disposal. But yeah. But that's gonna be enough for my rambling. Tell me, what did you guys think about this pitch? Am I cooking, or should I just stay in the kitchen? Did I burn the food, or did I make a 5-course meal? But yeah, tell me what you think. Is there anything I should add or change? Yeah, tell me your thoughts. Last time, please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. This is definitely a longer video for me, and I'm going to do very minimal editing to the audio. So it's all going to be, you know, more genuine. But yeah, anyways, like and subscribe if you like this video. And again, thank you so much if you've watched this far and made it to the end. That really means a lot. And either way, just like always, take care and peace out, guys.